Build a polished wardrobe that shows you stay you wherever you go with Mack Weldon. Use code MAC25 for 25% off your first order of $125 or more at MackWeldon.com.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pammy Out Loud. I'm your host, Pamela Walsh, and whether you are a longtime friend or a new listener, I am sure glad that you are here. Okay, let's just jump right in. I have been thinking a lot this week about how do you comfort people when they are going through times of grief, tragedy, or some hardship. And now, while this has been something that I have ruminated on for many years, I have only, this particular week has been filled with such tragic news from Central Texas over the catastrophic flooding and loss of life in Central Texas, which is, of course, my home base and an area that I know and love very well. Anytime you have loss of life, and particularly young children, it touches people in a profound way. But certainly when it is some place that you are very familiar with and that you have spent time, it resonates in such a different way, and it shakes you to your very core. I can see those shores of the Guadalupe, a river that I have spent time on, and floated down the river on inner tubes in college. It is, I know women that went to Camp Mystic as young girls. So it feels very personal to me. And I have just found myself in this last week very consumed with news feed, Facebook, Instagram, tributes and posts to those that have lost their life. And I find myself thinking about some of the things that I'm reading and seeing and asking myself, does this really help those that are left behind? Are we offering the kind of support that is needed? And then how do you do that? What is the right thing to say? Is there a right thing? For me personally, I want to also go back. I started thinking about this topic many years ago when I was a young mom, and our second son was born with a genetic disorder that required several surgeries over a period of years. And some of them were more serious than others, involving neurosurgeons and plastic surgeons. And it was that time as a young mother, I became very aware of what people were saying to me and what they were, while well-intentioned, some of them really didn't do very much to help me, and in fact made me kind of angry. And even though you knew they were well-intentioned, and I really want to offer grace to people that are at least trying to say something, right? But then also the ones that were helpful, and then the ones that weren't. And it started me on this lifelong study of what do you say to people during those times. I think it's like many other things in your life that until something happens to you, maybe you're not so good at it, or you haven't really thought that much about it. And then when it does, you start to be much more in tune with how important it is to do a better job. So I'm offering this conversation up to y'all to start the conversation, I should say, with what are the things that you feel help when you have gone through hardships, loss of loved ones, times of grief, that people have done for you, people have said to you, that have offered you support and comfort? And then maybe what are the ones that haven't? When I was going through, I should say when I was going through, is when my son was going through these things. And I spent a lot of time in ICU, pediatric ICU. And let me just say, that is not a happy place to be. A pediatric ICU is not a happy place to be. There are lots of very grim and sad stories there. And I came to meet some mothers, and I started the conversation with them back in the 90s on this very topic. I've gone on to read several books about it, and one of them is the seminal work by the Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People, which greatly informed my particular belief system on how you can offer sources of support. One of the things that I looked into is the definition of comfort. And in my research, what I had found is that comfort comprises of two things. One is that you're validating someone's experience, and the second one is that you are providing support. Validation of feelings and offers of support, or some support mechanism. If you think about these two conditions, that they can inform your conversations, your written word that you want to share with people, that if you can meet the criteria of support and of validation, you will go a long way in providing effective and nurturing comfort to someone else. I'm going to jump right in. I've collected a list of things that I call it the top 5 things you should not say to people when they are going through something. And then also I, in turn, have the 5 things that you can say / do to make a difference. So the number one thing that I want to suggest is to avoid platitudes. Avoid platitudes. And platitudes are those pithy, trite sayings that just seem so natural to flow off your tongue, and we so frequently do it without much thought. The actual definition of platitudes is the following: a remark or statement, especially one with moral content, that may have been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. So with that, I'm going to start with some of the very typical platitudes that people will offer to those that are going through crisis or grief. The very first one I'm going to start with is, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. This seems to be a real go-to one, and I'm just going to say I think we need to be extremely careful in general about offering any faith-based expressions of comfort unless you are very sure of where the other person stands. It can be a little tricky, and sometimes when you say things that are meant to be supportive, they do not come out that way. And this was one that people said to me a lot. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And what I found it did for me was it made me angry. I got angry. I felt like, okay, so God's given this to me because I'm so strong, but because you're not strong, you don't have to go through this. My kid is getting this condition because I'm so strong and I can handle it. And I know in my heart that's not what they meant. But in that moment when they would say, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, I felt very angry, and not just angry at them, but angry at God. I thought, what the hell, God? Why am I going through this? And why do my children have to go through this to prove something? So stay away from God doesn't give you more than you can handle. The next one I'm going to say is when people say, I know just how you feel. I know just how you feel. Listen, nobody knows just how anybody else feels, ever, period. I remember during one of Bobby's surgeries, now he's having neurosurgery, okay? Let me just tell you that at this point. And someone said to me, I know just how you feel. I was so scared when they put tubes in my son's ears. And I thought, yeah, that's the same thing. Not, right? You got to be super careful about using, just how they feel, because you can't. None of us can know how anyone else feels. And if you say that, when somebody, even if you go through something extremely similar, like they lost their mother and you lost your mother, right? For you to say, I know just how you feel when my mother died, blah, what happens is they have a different relationship with their mother. It was different conditions. All those parameters are very different. So yes, while you both lost a mother and there is some similarity there, it's a completely different experience. What happens when you say, I know just how you feel, the second part of it is, frequently, that leads you down the path of telling a story instead of listening. You start talking, you start saying, when my mother died, when this happened to me, when I went through breast cancer, when my sister had a miscarriage, you start talking and you quit listening. So you are not validating their feelings. Remember, that's one of the key components to comfort, is that you have to validate people's feelings. So when you start making it all about you, you cease to validate their feelings. Stay away from, I know just how you feel. The third one that about avoiding platitudes is, it'll make you better. It'll make you a better blah, whatever that is, right? I talked about Harold Kushner, the author of the book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And for those of you that don't know his story, he had a son who had a very rare genetic disorder called progeria that caused him to age very quickly. And he passed away at the age of 13. Harold Kushner said that people would say to him, it's going to make you a better rabbi. And he said, I'd rather be a crummy rabbi. I'd rather be a non-supportive, unsympathetic rabbi and have my son than to be a better rabbi because he's gone. So stay away from, it'll make you a better fill in the blank. The next one I want to talk to you about is very common, right? Now, this is for people that have medical conditions or going through medical challenges or other hardships with their children or someone, right? You say, well, things could be worse. Things could be worse. Again, this is invalidating their feelings. I share a story with you now. I was talking about this with my friend Sally many years ago, and she was sharing with me her own experiences with this topic, and she said, "Oh, yes." She says, "Let me tell you about one time that I made that mistake." And she explained about some good friends of theirs that had been, they had had a child born with a severe bilateral cleft, and the baby was just a few months old, and they were over for dinner, and they got into a conversation about the baby and, what the expectations were going to be and the surgical requirements and medical needs and all the different things that they were going to have to go through to create the best life for their child. And at the end of the evening, as they're wrapping it up and they're going to the door, my friend Sally said, I put my arm around the husband and said, Jack, things could be worse. And he said, "You're right, Sally. It could be your baby." And she said, she thought, ouch. And I told her in that moment, I said, Sally, that was not just you. He was locked and loaded and ready to say that because he had heard that so many times already. And he was so tired of it that he was ready to fire that back at you. So she said, I knew better when I said it. Like, I don't even know why I said it. And I thought, yep, because that's what happens to us. We revert to these little trite sayings that we've heard all of our lives from other people in other situations, and even our parents,
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Things could be worse. How many times have you heard your mother or your father say that, right? And it comes out so easily, but it's one of those ones you got to be super careful about. The final fifth one, platitude that I would say that you need to avoid is kind of the other side of the coin of, well, things could be worse. And that is, at least it's not fill in the blank, or at least you can fill in the blank. Any sentence that starts with at least, forget it, avoid it, negate it. I will use an example. I knew someone who had miscarried, and they were told, at least you can have another baby. Listen, again, you are invalidating somebody's feelings. Anything that does that is not a source of comfort. So avoid those easy to go to platitudes whenever you are speaking with or writing to someone who is struggling and is in need of comfort. Okay, so that's number one. That's point number one. Avoid platitudes. The second thing I want to say is, and this gets into, again, I said, be very careful about being faith-based, sharing things that are faith-based. And what do I mean by that is you just have to be very careful in assuming that someone believes the way that you believe and will find comfort in the things that will give you comfort. And I'm not saying never share faith-based, because our faith and the comfort that we get from it can be a great support and a way to validate someone else. But you need to be sure that they share your same faith belief. Harold Kushner, again, has a great quote where he says, God is like a mirror. The mirror never changes, but everybody who looks in it sees something different. Remember that. Remember that when you are tempted to give a faith-based comfort to someone else, that they may not share your same belief system and may not then find comfort in what you have to say. Not to say you should not say it. It's just something to take into consideration. I had a situation a few years ago when my father was recovering from an injury and was in the hospital, and I was in a prayer group. And immediately when I shared that my dad, I could use some prayers for my father, the very first thing I was asked was, is your dad a Christian? And I'm a Christian, and I felt very, defensive and like kind of irritable, like, wow, why can't you just pray for my dad to get better? Why is this even coming into this conversation? I did not find that supportive. Maybe other people do, and I'd be interested in if you do find that supportive, let me know where you stand on that. I also, another one I've seen a lot of Instagram posts this last week in recognition of those who've lost their lives in Texas and the small children. And there's one in particular that really caught me, and it's a picture of little girls running to Jesus. It's a illustration of that. And they have big smiles on their face, and he has open arms. And I know the intention behind that is, Jesus has these little children now. But my question is it the timing? Is it too early? If I'm a mother of one of those lost children and we have not even recovered her body yet, am I looking at that and finding comfort in it? And I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe they do. But I sometimes wonder if the things that we say and we do are more to make ourselves feel better than it is to make the person that we are supposedly trying to provide comfort and support for. So just another thing to think about. The third thing that I'd say that you should avoid is asking details when somebody is in crisis or at the loss of someone. And what I mean by this is, my friend Linda and her husband Brent were with us this weekend, and we were talking about this very topic. Linda has gone through 2 very serious rounds of leukemia, and she talked about people who asked, well, what's your prognosis? And I think this is another one, and I know I've been guilty of it myself, of asking somebody, what's your prognosis? If they want to share that information with you, they will. But that's not something that you should ask. Another example that I wanted to share, I will never forget this one. And again, this one happened 35 years ago when I was in ICU with my son Bobby, who was 9 weeks old at the time. And I met a mother who was there, and her 16-year-old son was in ICU. He had been driving his truck in a rainstorm on his way to visit his grandmother and lost control and flipped the truck and was now in very serious condition. He was conscious, but he was going to have to learn how to walk and talk and eat, and everything was going to have to be relearned. And she and I were talking about this concept of what things help you and what things offer support. And she said, I'm so tired of people asking me, was he wearing his seatbelt? I'm so tired of people asking that question. And I thought for a moment, yep, I can see that, right? I can see myself asking that question. And why do we ask that question? Are we asking it to provide support and comfort? No. The only person we're getting support and comfort for is ourselves, because we are looking for a way to isolate, to say, you know what? That won't happen to my child because my kid wears his seatbelt, right? We are looking for some answer that can protect us, can insulate us from that same thing happening. We are not interested in providing comfort and support to somebody else. Be very careful when you ask for details. Avoid the details. If the person wants to, they will share that information with you. And obviously, I think a lot of this depends on what your relationship is with the people that you're providing comfort for. There's things I think that your mother can say to you, or your very best friend, or your minister, that just the average neighbor, friend, casual acquaintance can't say. So all of these are just kind of my general thoughts on, pay attention and evaluate what is your role in all of this, right? And are you asking to provide them comfort, or are you looking for it yourself? The fourth thing to avoid is avoid giving advice. Avoid saying things like, you should go to the Mayo Clinic. You should try this diet. You should, experiment with this drug. Be very careful about offering advice, unsolicited advice. I love that my friend has a saying, don't should on yourself or should on other people. Don't should on somebody. The fifth and final thing I think that we need to avoid is, and raise your hand if you're guilty of this, let me know if there's anything I can do. Me, I've said that one. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I've said it and I've meant it. I've said it and I've smiled as I walked away. And you know what happens? The person is not going to do that. They are not going to go, geez, you know what? I could use dinner tonight. Ding-a-ling, hello, would you bring me some dinner tonight? Wow, I really could use someone to come clean my toilet. Anybody? Anybody? No, people don't just offer that blanket, let me know if there's anything to do. Because people will not reach out to you and say, I need you to do this. They might, but it's very, very few. Instead, they will try to do it themselves. They will find other ways of tapping in. So avoid saying that. So what can you do? So far I've told you everything you can't. What is it that you can do that provides validation and support? The two components that are necessary in providing comfort to other people. So I'm going to start with what I said don't say, being let me know if there's anything I can do. Flip that and offer concrete suggestions. So number one, make a concrete offer of service or suggestion. So for example, hey, I'm making lasagna tomorrow and I'm going to bring a second plant, I'm double the batch. I'm bringing it over tomorrow night. I'd like to make you dinner. What night works for you? I'm on my way to the grocery store. What can I pick up for you? Give them concrete ideas and just enact them. Make it so it's easy for them to say yes instead of them having to reach for the telephone and ask you, right? You want them to say yes instead of you to have to say yes to it. Does that make sense? So the number one thing you can do is to offer a concrete suggestion or service of support. Number two is just do it. Number two is just do something. Even if you don't know what the right thing is to do, just do something. And again, you can just show up with meals. You can, I got to tell you a story. Another thing that really touched me, a couple of things, of two great examples of this. When Bobby was going through one of his big surgeries and we were home from the hospital, but in recovery, big time recovery. And at the time I had two other boys. One was 2, I think Daniel was 2 and Austin was probably 7. And we were home from the hospital. We'd been in the hospital for 5 days. One day, my friend Marjorie called me and she said, hey, I'm on my way to the park with my boys. Can I swing by and pick up Austin and Danny so that you and Bobby can rest? I said, that would be awesome, right? So that's an example of that concrete offer of support where I feel like I'm not really imposing on her. She's doing it anyway. But I know she made that plan in order to give me that gift. That is a true offer and a way to make somebody feel definitely supported. Another situation that happened, we ended up in kind of a medical crisis with our oldest son, Austin, when he got an infection post-op and his knee. And all of a sudden we had to hurry and get to the hospital. And I had spent 2 nights in the hospital with Austin. I hadn't been home. And finally, Brian had come over to the hospital and he says, listen, I'm going to be here at the hospital. Go home, take a nap, take a shower. and come back when you're ready. And so I had gotten in the car and I was driving home, and I rounded the corner on Dedham Lane, and there was Brian Davis mowing our lawn. Our friend had taken it upon himself to come mow our yard. Now, let me just tell you, I'm not even sure our yard needed to be mowed. It hadn't been that many days since this crisis had started. But I was so overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of that gesture of him just doing something for us, that for me, that was how God showed up in my life. It was the way that other people rallied to do things. Now, if he had called and said, "Do you want me to mow your lawn?" I would not have said yes. But to just come around the corner and see that absolutely touched my soul to the very core. So just do something. Arrange for a maid to come clean the house. That's another great thing. And then the other thing to know is I've often gotten caught up in, well, I'm going to make dinner, but it has to be a home-cooked dinner, and it's got to be 5 courses, and I need to make a dessert, and I ought to have flowers when I show up. And I make it into this huge thing that has to be done. And you know what it does is it keeps me from doing it. Because I think unless it's this huge grand gesture, it won't count. You know what? It's perfectly fine to pick up the frozen pizza, the bag of salad, the gift card to go to a restaurant or to DoorDash something to them. All of those things are offers of support and signs of support. It doesn't have to be grand to make it a useful and important gesture. Just do it. Remember the Nike logo. Just do it. The third thing I'd say on the things to do is never underestimate the value of a card or a text message. You know, there are, my friend Stacy said when she was going through breast cancer, the number of text messages that she got, and especially she said the ones that ended with, "I don't worry about responding. I just wanted to check in on you. Just wanted to tell you that I'm thinking of you." These signs are hugely important. They matter, and they are a very simple thing to do. And if you don't know what to say, check out AI. AI can help you. What do you say? I even saw I saw an AI about how to comfort somebody who lost their dog. I mean, there's so many resources out there on the internet that if you feel like you cannot find the words, somebody else can help you. And just never underestimate that. I remember getting cards from people that I didn't even know very well, but they took the time to reach out to me. And I thought, this really lifted me up. And I felt the community arms wrapped around us just in these very small, simple gestures of writing a text or sending a card. The fifth and final thing that I want to say is specifically related to the loss of a loved one. And I'm calling this one Say Their Name. My sister Sandra shared this with me recently, and it left a deep impression on me. And I think that it's very important to share. You know, my sister Sandra lost her only child a couple years ago, and Eric was an amazing young man, and there was such an overwhelming sense of loss and sadness, of course, when he passed away. And since that time, she has dealt with moving to a new community. And, you know, she talked about how it's very common, a very common social question. Do you have any children? Do you have grandchildren? And she said it's such a interesting conversation. She said, because I don't necessarily want to say, yeah, I had a son and he died. And then there's this, "Oh, I'm sorry, what happened?" And she said, the whole mood goes down and, what do you do with that? And recently she shared with me that she said, Pam, I found the perfect response when someone tells you that they lost their child. And I thought, what? And she said, yes, that it had just happened to her. And she was so touched by it. She said, I won't forget it. And I said, what is that? And she said, conversation had happened, do you have any children? And she said, that she had lost her son, her only son. And her friend said to her acquaintance, the new person she just met, said, what was his name? What was his name? And it's such a beautiful way to acknowledge their life, right? Instead of the focus being on the worst thing that happened, which is that they died, right? The immediate instinct when somebody tells you that they lost a child is, oh, I'm sorry. What happened? There's, and then it becomes this whole cluster of icky feelings and not necessarily positive memories. But in asking the very simple question, what was his name, right? You are opening the door for that person to talk about their loved one in a way that is positive and happy and joyous. And it opens the door. If they want to continue to share details, they can. And it doesn't have to be the details of the worst day of their life, right? So that one has really stayed with me, and I want to share it with you in hopes that you can use it to the people that are important in your life. What was their name? What was their name, right? The follow-up to that is, don't forget milestones and anniversaries. When someone loses someone, the anniversary of their death, different hallmarks, benchmarks of their life, their birthday, wedding anniversaries, all of those things are very significant reminders of the person that they have lost, right? And I came across a beautiful quote that I'd like to share regarding this. We think, because I've been guilty of this too. It's like, well, I don't want to bring it up because it might make them feel bad. You don't want to talk about the person because it might make them feel bad. And what I have learned from my sister and other people who have lost loved ones is it gives them great joy to talk about their person, their loved one, and to hear your fond memories of them instead of, oh, I don't want to talk about it because it might upset her. Hearing good stories always brings smiles to people's heart, right? So Elizabeth Edwards says this: if you know someone who has lost a child or lost anybody who is important to them, and you're afraid to make them sad by reminding them that they died, they didn't forget they died. You're not reminding them. What you're reminding them of is that you remembered they lived. And that is a great, great gift. Okay, everybody, with that, I am wrapping it up. I invite you to please join me on the Facebook page, Pammy Out Loud, or email me at the same address, pammyoutloud@gmail.com, to share your comments, concerns, questions, your own insights, and your own experiences with what things have you experienced that have helped you and comforted you, and maybe the ones that didn't as well, so that we can all learn to do a better job at this. Remember, if something is going to provide comfort, it needs to validate their feelings and it needs to provide support. If it doesn't do these two things, we're going to miss the mark. I think that it's important to speak out loud about this stuff so that we can all learn and we can all strive to do a better job. And also, remember, clenching your jaw gives you TMJ. Goodbye, everybody. I love you.